Hi, my name is Leah Peralt, and I'm doing my leadership interview presentation for COM 430. This project challenged us to select someone that we viewed as a leader, separate from a manager. We learned that those were two different things. And for this selection, for this project, excuse me, I selected Raina Ellis, the Director of Customer Service at the company that I work at. Quick background on Raina. She's worked for me for 2 years. She just recently took over my job and my team and is really developing as a leader. She was selected very intentionally. I absolutely view her as a leader. And what I hoped to really get out of this project, besides the project itself for school, was to have Raina see that too. And it absolutely worked, which was exciting. So today we're going to talk about three really major things that came out for Raina in this interview. So three main topics I posed her with is, does she know the difference between a manager and a leader? Does she focus on her leadership development? So what does she think is important as developing as a leader, and why? And then lastly, what tools is she using? Does she use tools? Does she implement different pieces for her specific leadership style? So those are kind of the three areas we interviewed on. And then there are some really main topics that came out of that. So we're going to start on, does she know the difference between leadership and management? Yes. What came out of this presentation was that Raina, as we learned in our text, right, that there's managers who are task-oriented, getting the job done, taking one step at a time, whereas a leader views the big picture, what's coming next, how to take the certain steps to get there, and how it's going to affect the future. So is Raina future-oriented? Yes. Some responses that really came up that really stood out as understanding this definition. In our text, we were introduced to leadership as storytelling, leadership as sense-making, leadership as a motivator. And through Raina's responses, she hit on these. We are a startup company, leading as a storyteller. Huge deal. We don't know where we're going. We kind of know where we came from when we're developing it. So throughout Raina's responses, she addressed those. She was excited to hear it had a name. Leadership as a sense maker was another one that really, really stood out. We do have times we don't meet payroll, and making sense of that to 8 other people for Raina is something that she touched on in her interview. Additionally, the motivator, Raina came out, common theme was, I want to empower, I want to lead. I want to motivate my employees every day to come to work, even if I'm the only reason they come. And she demonstrated that ability and spoke with passion and heart, which is that piece of motivation. As for things that Raina is focusing on for her development and what she thinks is important for development as a leader, these came out as well. And what was the most interesting that stood out to me was her definition of power. It wasn't stated as, I lead with this kind of power. However, her common trend came out in terms of, our text introduces us as well to legitimate power, expert power, referent power. These three types of powers came up in her interview without names, but with the concept behind it, which was awesome. So legitimate power, right? She has the title that she could say, hey, I'm flashing my badge, right? I have this power, I've been given the name. However, Raina made it very clear in her interview that that's not the way she leads. Raina leads with integrity, confidence, heart, by demonstration, right? By having done that expert power. And what was cool was watching the referent power come out. Being a role model, she shared some stories with the way that her team has come back and responded to some of the things that she's done. And you can see the way that her team admires her and looks up to her and follows her. Or Raina taught me this, and now I know how to do it. So what we focused on is that Raina kind of she X's out that legitimate power. I don't want it. I don't need it. That's not why I have respect. And she leads with that referent and expert power, which is something special. She wants to know how to do everything. And she does for the most part, which is really cool. That third point was, what does she use to lead and how? In this part, she touched on some leadership styles, or excuse me, communication styles. And she also touched on the empowerment of followers. The leadership style that she leads probably the most with that we could identify was the democratic leadership style, engaging the followers as part of the process building. She also kind of hinted on adaptive leadership without really knowing that she was. Adaptive leadership in the sense of being able to adapt to the ever-changing environment, both personnel-wise and changing in the technology and the company-wise. So that was pretty cool. The empowerment of followers is what really stood out to me. So she uses this tool to effectively grow the company, and that is something incredibly special. So those were the three things that we really touched on. So as a quick recap, that definition between leadership and manager, Raina identified very easily. Motivator, storyteller, sense maker, that's a leader. We touched on what does she focus on. Her power is important to her, but not in the way that it is in most society. It's important to her to be a motivator, not a motivator, a role model, and an expert in her field. We touched on her leadership style, which definitely affects that kind of power, I believe personally. We touched on the empowerment of followers and how her communication style adapts. Again, filling in the section of, does she know the difference between a manager and a leader? Yes. What is she focusing on? Development, power, styles. What does she use to lead? Different tools, that communication style and that leadership style. Very exciting project. Definitely enjoyed doing it. Loved watching Raina's confidence build, and for my respect to her as a leader to grow even more. So thank you for listening.